Okay, class, welcome. This is the first online lecture class scheduled for Monday, March 16th, Medieval Music, 500 to 1425. So this is all brand new, presenting the material in this way. So bear with me as I adapt to these new procedures. So today we're going to cover music of the medieval period. The first three classes we talked about the elements of music, where we built a vocabulary so we can talk about music as we move forward in time. So we're starting today with Gregorian chant, music known as chant, Gregorian chant, plain chant. If you hear any of those words, they all mean the same thing. And we'll talk about why it's called Gregorian chant in a moment. But this is music that is, if you're looking at your syllabus, on page 9 of the syllabus, medieval music, also known as the Middle Ages, Gregorian chant. This is the official music of the Roman Catholic Church. So, why do we begin here? So for our purposes, we start here because this is the first notated music, the first Western music that is written down. So it's the earliest music that we have record of. There are other kinds of music being written, popular music, folk music. Just as a lot of music today is written, popular music, rock music, we have the means of recording that today, and that's how we pass that music on to generations and we teach it to others. But at least now we have a means of recording it, so music can be passed down in that way as well. But back then, popular music was just word of mouth. One person teaches another person a song, and that person might remember it a little differently, and they teach the next person, and they teach the next person. So when we look back at popular music, folk music, from the Middle Ages, medieval period, same thing. And even in the Renaissance, we find out that we have different versions of this same music because things evolve and change. People remember it differently. With the invention of notation, it's written down. So there might be minor changes in interpretation, but for the most part, it is remaining the same. So the first piece that we'll hear today sounds today pretty much like it would have sounded then. So we're starting with Gregorian chant. As I already mentioned, this is the official music of the Roman Catholic Church. So priests, monks, clergy of all kinds, nuns, they are the ones that in the Western world invented music notation as we know it today. So they were educated. Even privileged people of the period, it was not common for them to be able to read and write words, let alone music, but it was common for the clergy. So they created this system which has been improved upon over centuries. Some other characteristics of this music that we've talked about. The texture is monophonic. So remember, there are three basic musical textures that we're listening for in music. Monophonic, one melody by itself. Polyphony, two or more melodies at the same time. And then homophony, one melody with accompaniment. This music is monophonic, one melody by itself. That is the texture. Other characteristics, it's Latin, so the text for this music would be Latin. It's the official language of the Mass. And this music is written for the Mass, and its sole purpose is the glorification of God. So this is what we would call liturgical music, as opposed to secular music. Liturgical meaning anything that's written for a church service, for the Mass. Secular music would be anything not for a church service, for the Mass. So, other characteristics of this music. I already mentioned it's monophonic, one melody. It's also a cappella, okay? So, again, you'll need to refer to your syllabus on page 9. These are the terms that are listed under medieval music. A cappella, this is vocal music without instrumental accompaniment. So that's what we will be listening to. Vocal music without instrumental accompaniment. In Latin, for the glorification of God, it's monophonic. We know what that is. Another characteristic is that it is non-metered. So what do I mean by that? Well, remember the first couple classes we spent time talking about duple and triple meter, listening to music and clapping out, is this in twos or is it in threes? Well, this music is non-metered. So when music is first notated, just the pitches are specific, not the rhythm. But more specifically than that, you can still write music today that has a non-metered quality to it. You just downplay the beats. So this music is a combination of the two, but it has a flowing quality to it. So this is music I would never ask you to tell me is this duple or triple meter, because it's really neither. And here's another thing that we talked about in the introductory classes. The mode, we talked about two major, I better not use that word major because that's what one of them is called. We talked about two scales that most music is written in, right? The major scale, the happy sounding scale, and the minor scale, the sad sounding scale. Well, Gregorian chant is in neither major or minor. They use what are known as church modes. And again, on your syllabus, you'll need to refer to that under medieval music, music of the Middle Ages, page 9, church modes, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. Okay, you don't have to memorize all those terms, but these are different scales. So, what was the basic principle we said about why major scales and minor scales sound different? When you move from one note to the next, you move either by whole step or half step. So we're just changing the order as to where the whole steps and half steps are. That's what we do with modes. So we're just changing the order. So that's another quality of, here's a mode, here's an interesting mode. Okay, this is a Phrygian mode. Notice it has kind of a Spanish sound. So when we hear Spanish music, I use that as an example because that's something that we're all kind of familiar with. Why does it sound like that? It has to do with rhythm. It also has to do with that scale that I just played. That's neither major or minor. That's the Phrygian mode. Okay? So, I just gave a very broad overview, so let me try to pull this in before we listen to it. So, what are the characteristics of Gregorian chant, the musical characteristics? Texture is monophonic. It's also a cappella, meaning vocal music without instrumental accompaniment. It's non-metered. The quality, it has a flowing quality, so it's neither duple meter or triple meter. And it's based on what we now call church modes. So it's neither the major scale or the minor scale. It's the Ionian or the Dorian or the Phrygian. And these words, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, when monks were creating this new sound and the theory behind it, there was belief that they were writing scales, using the scales that the ancient Greeks used. Now, it's interesting how much we know about ancient Greece, ancient Rome. So much has been written about the politics, the art, but we know very little about the music, what it sounded like. And why is that? Well, because it wasn't written down. There's a lot written about the music, but not theoretically. So what was music used for back in ancient Greece? Well, same thing it's used for today. For worship, for celebrations, for concerts, for funerals, for plays, for theaters, all the same things, but how it actually sounded, we're not sure. But we do know what they called their scales, and these are the same scales that they called their scales Dorian, Phrygian, and so on. But what we now know is Dorian and Phrygian and Lydian and so on is not the same as it was then. So let's just listen to a little bit. Now this is going to be a little haphazard. I'm just going to play this on my phone with hopefully a high quality speaker, but you have the link for this on your syllabus, so you should listen to this on on your own. But I just want us to hear a little bit of the sound of this before I go on and say some more things. So it's in Latin, it's a cappella, just voices, monophonic, many voices, but they're all singing the same thing. The same melody. What's the meter? It's flowing. It's not duple, it's not triple. What's the scale? It's not major, it's not minor, it's one of the modes. It happens to be Dorian. Okay, so that's enough of that for right now. Okay, so the first piece that we're going to listen to, actually the only example that we're going to listen to of chant, is what I just played a short excerpt from, the Dies Irae. So this music, as I already mentioned earlier, is referred to as chant, sometimes called plain chant, and sometimes called Gregorian chant. It's the same thing by different names. So chant would be the most generic title for it. So, but it's most often referred to as Gregorian chant. So why Gregorian chant? Well, this music is anonymously written. You've probably heard that before. Somebody wrote it, but we say anonymous because we don't know who wrote it. So when this music is being written by clergy, priests, nuns, monks, It is not the custom to claim ownership, to say, well, I wrote this piece and to write your name on it, because you're writing this for a higher purpose. This is for the glorification of God. So that would have not been the custom. That would have been frowned upon to some degree. So you write the music, and it's just given into the, is part of the church, part of the music that is used for the Mass and other types of services throughout the church year. Well, at some point, there's all this music, and it's unorganized. Okay, so there's this big undertaking to organize the music, to catalog it. So think of it like being in a library, and there's a bunch of books in the back. Nobody knows what they are, and somebody has to go back there and sift through them, figure out what they are. So this big undertaking of cataloging of all these chants, so that you would find, be able to, if you needed music for, well, we know the two obvious celebrations in the church calendar, Easter and Christmas, right? You need music for those times of the year, but there are also throughout the year you need to find music. In other services, daily services like Vespers, for example, would be one of many. There are certain chants that go along with the different days of the year. So this music is cataloged, and Pope Gregory is the Pope from 540 to 604. So that's where we get, that's why it's called Gregorian chant. He was the guy in charge when the music was cataloged. So there it is. That's why it's called Gregorian chant. So the Dies Irae chant, the literal translation is Day of Wrath. This is something that would be sung at a requiem, at a funeral, and it is very poignant and doesn't mince words about Judgment Day. So that's what the text is in this chant. By today's standards, we would think of this as being sort of harsh and very gloomy, but here is the translation of just a few of the verses. Day of wrath and doom impending, David's word with Sibyl's blending, heaven and earth in ashes ending. Oh, what fear man's bosom rendeth, when from heaven the judge descendeth, on whose sentence all dependeth. Okay? Day is struck and nature quaking, all creation is awaking to its judge and answer making. So the overriding message here is this is the day of wrath. This is Judgment Day. So if you've led a good life, you'll be rewarded and go to heaven. If you didn't, you will not be going to heaven. You will be going to the other place. So let's listen to this. And again, I'm going to play it for you now, just to make it part of this lecture, but to get a better sound quality and to be able to follow the video, although there's not much to see in this first video, but there will be in the second and most videos that we watch and listen to later on in the year. Here it is, the Dies Irae chant. I'm going to say it one more time just to drive home the points of what the characteristics are. It's monophonic in texture, one melody by itself. The text is Latin. This is the official music of the Roman Catholic Church. It is a cappella, meaning it is vocal music, no instrumental accompaniment. It is non-metered. It is neither duple or triple. And The scale that they use is neither major or minor, the two most common scales that we listen to in class and I played examples for. It is one of the modes, so which in this mode happens to be the Dorian mode. So all those characteristics is why when we hear this, it sounds like Gregorian chant, right? Right? So I bet all of us, when we hear this, we could say, this is church music. Why is it church music? Well, I don't know. I could just tell it's church music. Well, now you know how to define why it is. Monophonic, Latin text, a cappella, non-metered, modal, Dorian mode in particular in this case. Here it is, the Dies Irae chant. Dies irae, dies illa, salvet seculum infamia, te se David consiglio. Quantus semores futurus, quanto iudes estenturus, und aspect Okay, so that's enough for us to listen to together right now. But listen to that on your own, and if you click on the link of the Wikipedia article on this piece in particular, the Dies Irae chant, you will see the Latin text with the English translation to the right of it, some of the things we talked about. Okay. So if you're watching this video in class time, right, either at the 12 o'clock or the 1 o'clock, I am available to answer any questions in real time, okay? So I'll be sitting at my computer, and email me any questions that you have, and I will answer them. And if you need to talk, leave a number and I will call you up and we can discuss anything concerning this lecture or anything else moving forward. Okay, so that is our example of Gregorian chant and the earliest sound of medieval music, which is monophonic. Now, as you notice, medieval music spans a long time, right? Roughly 500 to 1450, 1425 I have on my syllabus, okay? So 500 to 1425, that's a very big period. And in that time, we go from monophonic music, monophony, to polyphony. But the transition is very gradual, and I'm going to attempt to give an example of how music is progressing before we listen to our second piece for today's lecture, a secular piece, also a cappella vocal piece, but it is it is polyphonic, a very basic polyphonic. So here's a very broad view of how monophony develops into polyphony. So 400 to 700 we have monophony, and that would sound, if I were to create a musical phrase, that's monophony, right? One melody by itself. 400 to 700. 700 to 900, we get the earliest form of polyphony. And again, that is on your syllabus, page 9, under medieval music, organum. Organum is the earliest form of polyphonic music, okay? You want to remember that, that's important. The earliest form of polyphonic music. And what it is, it's taking this monophonic melody, adding an interval of a fifth above each note. So if I play a scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I play this melody again, but I harmonize each note by the interval of a fifth, and I move in parallel, we call that organum. And it was considered polyphonic. By today's standards, we might not call that polyphony because we're just harmonizing one note and moving it in parallel motion. But that's what we're calling it because that's what it was called. So, organum, the earliest form of polyphonic music, written roughly 700 to 900. So it seems like it's taking a long time for music to evolve here texturally, right? That doesn't seem like a lot happening in all that time. But that's a pretty unique sound in early church music. It also happens to be a sound that a lot of rock music uses, heavy metal music. We think of, I'm sure everybody knows this one, using the same intervals, okay? So we hear this sound in rock music a lot as well. Okay, so moving on. Music written roughly 900 to 1,000, we still just have two notes at the same time, but now there's more independence. We might refer to it as oblique motion or counterpoint, music that's moving in an opposite direction. So as the original melody note goes up, the new line might come down. So there's more independence. So here's what that might sound like. So each example, I'm playing the same melody on the bottom. That's plain chant, 400 to 700. Organum, 700 to 900. Okay. Now, finally, polyphonic music as it develops with more independence or oblique motion, 900 to 1,000. That might sound like this. Okay, you hear that? There's a new line that has more distinction on top, but that bottom line is still the same. Then, finally, and that's kind of the music that we're about to hear in later medieval music, 1000 to 1200 is where you might have, let's say we have the original line that I first played for you, and rather than writing just one new note to each note that already exists, we might have two or three melody notes for each one note that's on the bottom. And that might sound like this. Okay? The bottom line was always the same. So here it is again. Plain chant, 400 to 700. Organum, earliest form of polyphony, remember that term, 700 to 900, parallel motion by a fifth. 900 to 1000, there's more independence on the top line, we might say oblique motion. And then music 1000 to 1200, more independence. The top line might have 2 or 3 notes moving to each one note on the bottom line, and that might sound like this. And there you have it in a nutshell, polyphony developing. Okay. Then at this point, and I'm not going to give any more guitar examples, but we'll hear very quickly polyphonic music becoming much more complicated. So where we have not only 2 lines, but we have a 3rd line, and then a 4th line, and a lot more going on in each line. So polyphony tends to keep getting more polyphonic as we move into the Renaissance period. Almost, I hate to put it this way because it sounds negative and I don't mean it to be, but almost to the point where it self-destructs, where we get a new generation of composers in the Baroque period saying, wait a minute, you know, all this polyphony, there's too much going on. How can I express an emotion with 4 different people singing not only different melodies at the same time, but singing different words at the same time? How does anyone focus on that? Again, someone could argue the other point for how beautiful all those melodies are at the same time. But I'm just saying, that's where we're going. There's always a new generation with new ideas that some of that can be brought on by criticism of what already exists and wanting to move things forward. So let's move on to our next piece. What did I do with it? Thought I had all this stuff organized. So, music by Francesco Landini. There it is. Okay, Francesco Landini, an Italian composer. His dates are 1325 to 1397, roughly speaking. Very famous, prolific Italian composer of the 14th century. This is a piece in 2 voices, and it's called Behold Spring. Let me grab the text of this. I was so busy trying to set up this camera that I failed to get a couple other things ready. Here we go. Yeah, I wanted to tell you a little bit about this since it is in Italian. So this piece that we're about to listen to is in triple meter. Okay, so now meter is starting to take hold in compositions. Once you start writing polyphony, if you have more than one melody at the same time, you need some system for writing rhythm so that you can harmonize the 2 melodies or more melodies at the same time. And this piece is called Behold Spring. That's the English translation. So here's the text. It's not a very difficult text to understand. Here's the first verse. Behold spring, which makes the heart rejoice. It's the time to fall in love and to be of good cheer. Okay? We're going to call that the A section. That is the first verse, or as we might say, the first stanza, meaning the same thing. The second verse we'll call the B section. We see the air and the weather bringing about gladness. In this lovely time, everything has loveliness. Okay? So that is a new text, the B section, and new music. Then the third section. The meadows are covered with fresh grass and with flowers, and the trees are adorned in a similar manner. So here it is. We have a third text, a third stanza, different words, but the music is the same as the first section. So the form of the music is A, B, and then A again. But the text is different, so we might say A prime. So A, B, A prime. And then the fourth verse is, or we would say, it's the A section because it's the same music as the first and the same text. So, behold spring, which makes the heart rejoice. It's the time to fall in love and to be of good cheer. So what is the text? It's just about the glory of spring, right? The beauty of spring. Very easy thing to follow. And this would be an example of secular music, right? Because it is not for a church service. It is not about the glorification of God. Anything other than that is considered secular. Love songs, songs about spring, drinking songs, political songs. If it's not about the glorification of God, it's secular. If it is about the glorification of God, then that is liturgical music. So, so again, this is in triple meter, and I'm going to play this and speak over it to help you along with the form, but you want to listen to this piece on your own without me talking, so that you understand and can hear what's going on. Okay? So, it's in triple meter. I'll point that out once it gets started. The first verse, we're calling that section A. The second verse is section B because the text and the music changes. The third verse is A prime because the text changes again, but the music is the same as the first verse. Then the fourth verse we call A because it is exactly the same as the first verse. It is the same music and the same text. So here it is, behold spring, and let me get this going. That's a commercial.
I have always wanted to change my life, to take me to a higher...
Okay, that happens. You know that when you're watching YouTube. Now I'm not getting anything. So bear with me. Just might have to search it again. Okay. Now would be a good time to call in, right? But of course you have the luxury of pausing the video as well. Okay, so, and fast forwarding when I'm just wasting time here. Okay, here it is. Great, finally. All right. So here's the piece. And then before we get started, I want to say a couple things. So I'm going to put this picture up. So this is what we're about to listen to. So, all right. So I want to make it clear that this this piece is written just for two singers, okay? This guy and this woman, so soprano and a tenor voice. This is polyphonic music. It is in triple meter. Now, what else is happening? First of all, they're dressed to look the part. So try to get rid of the back heads of the audience members and those modern music stands. But you can see that they are dressed in how people would have dressed at this time in the 1300s. So we have the two singers that this piece is written for. And the instruments that we see are doubling the vocal lines, okay? So we have a recorder, okay? So we have a recorder player, a flute-like instrument. You can see where I'm pointing to. I hope so. Or maybe not. I can't tell. Okay. To the left of, or to the right of the woman as you're looking at this, there's someone playing a wind instrument. That person is doubling the vocalist. And then we have a string player right next to her that is yeah, this isn't quite working. Forgive me for my, I got to get used to what I'm doing here. So just bear with me. Okay, so this woman is going to be singing the soprano line, the top voice. And then this person over here with the white hat on, that is she is playing a recorder that will be doubling her line. Then over to the right of this gentleman, we have another person playing a recorder that's doubling, just playing the same line that he's singing. Then we have these two bowed string instruments, viola da gamba they're called, and they are just providing a drone, a pedal tone. So they're pedaling on the key that this piece is in, which is also Dorian, just like the last piece. That's the mode that they're using. So they're just pedaling on the D note as the melody is being played up above. So let's have a listen to this piece. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. That's triple meter. This is an instrumental introduction of the first verse. Here's the first verse. Second verse, the B section. Third verse, we call this A prime. Same music as the first, but different words. And the last verse, the A section. Same music and same text, same lyric as the first verse. Okay. All right, so there you have it. So today we talked about medieval music, starting with Gregorian chant, and it's monophonic. That was an example also of liturgical music, music written for the church. Then I gave the evolution in a nutshell of how polyphony develops throughout the Middle Ages. And we heard one example of a piece written in the latter part of the medieval period by Italian composer Francesco Landini, who lived, as I mentioned, roughly 1350, 1397 is around when the piece was written, and his dates of living were 1325 to 1397 is when he lived. And that would be an example of both early polyphony, which is what we get in the late medieval period, as well as an example of secular music. On page 9 of the syllabus, we covered Gregorian chant, church modes, organum, a cappella. I didn't mention those other terms, so don't worry too much about them right now. You could look those up on your own. I might make reference to them on the next lecture, which will be posted for Wednesday, and that will be Renaissance music. So that's really all we're going to say about medieval music. Music of the Middle Ages, medieval music means the same thing. We're going to be pushing on from there. Maybe I will say a word or two about the troubadours and trouvères since I brought it up. And I'm looking at my clock and we're still under 50 minutes, so that's good. The troubadours and trouvères, 12th and 13th century poets and musicians of the aristocracy, first secular music to be notated, only pitches, not rhythm. So it's self-explanatory. So what did we say about secular music? The early secular music is not written down. It's just passed on word of mouth, as we might say, from one person to the next, from one generation to the next. But we just heard a piece that was written down in the latter part of the medieval period. And it's around this time, so not in the 400s, 500s, 600s, but the 12th and 13th century. And the first people doing this were people that were known as troubadours and trouvères. So they were musicians, but they were also known as poets, musicians, aristocrats, those that were well off. So that's it for today. I hope this made sense. You have the luxury of rewinding and re-listening to things, and also skipping over the parts where I was trying to adapt the video or look for a piece of paper. So please feel free to contact me at any time. I will answer all emails within a 24-hour period, and in most cases less than that. But if you email me during class time, if you're in the 12 o'clock class, I will answer you in real time. And if you're in the 1 o'clock class, I will answer you in real time. And if you're in either of those classes and you email me within that 2-hour period, I'll be answering you. Okay? So take care and see you soon. You'll be seeing me on Wednesday with the new video.